Hello, I'm Will, and I'd like to welcome you to my Midnight Monologues. It's a great pleasure to have you stop by. Now, despite the name of this show, it doesn't exactly have to be midnight for you to join me. Hell, this episode wasn't even uploaded at midnight in my time zone. No matter the time of day or what you may be doing whilst listening, you're of course welcome here in our time together. Now, this episode is very special because it's the first ever episode of my Midnight Monologues. I'm excited, and admittedly a little nervous about this podcast since I'm here by myself. It's a lot easier to go through long-form content when you have others to carry conversation. But I have you, the listener, here with me. And that might just be all that I need. Now, to get into my mind a little as to why I started this show, I think it's important to get a little background of my inspirations. The ultimate goal of this podcast is to help you, the listener, to relax and maybe even fall asleep. I personally never really had too much of a struggle sleeping or relaxing, but I know lots of people do, and there's nothing wrong with that. We live in a time where there is always something to worry about, so relaxing is an understandable struggle. I usually fall asleep with the help of a video, or really any audio playing in the background. This could be something loud like a GTA 5 gaming video, or something softer like an episode of The Joy of Painting. Nevertheless, I need some type of sound to fall asleep, as do many others. So, I hope that I can assist you with that in some way. My inspiration for this podcast purely comes from the comedian Joe Pera. I discovered his comedy show, Joe Pera Talks With You, back on April 1st of 2022. My friends and I were watching YouTube videos together late at night on Discord when we found an hour-and-a-half April Fool's video uploaded by Adult Swim that had a few episodes of some of their more popular shows, such as Rick and Morty, Smiling Friends, The Eric Andre Show, and so on. The end of this video featured an episode of Joe Pera Talks With You, where he starts off by reading church announcements and then spends the rest of the episode explaining and visualizing his newfound love for the song Baba O'Reilly by the English rock band The Who. After watching this episode, my friends and I became obsessed with the show. Me and my friend Brian, who you may know from the Loaf of Milk podcast, spent the next few weeks watching all 3 seasons of Joe Pera Talks With You. We'd stay up late at night until 3 a.m. some nights watching his show. Each episode has such a niche and simple comedic value that warms the heart, and can ultimately make you feel tired due to Joe's soft-spoken voice. A little less than a year after my introduction to Joe Pera, he released his sleep-centered podcast, Drifting Off with Joe Pera. The podcast keeps a similar charm to his show, which provides a really nice listening experience. This news and the release of his podcast was especially uplifting due to the unfortunate news that was delivered in July of 2022 that Joe's show on Adult Swim was sadly canceled. Since the release of his podcast, I've listened to every episode multiple times. It really is that good. And I do recommend checking it out after your visit here. Anyway, I've been a big fan of Joe Pera ever since. I've wanted to see him on one of his stand-up comedy tours, and he's been in my area a few times, but the dates never really lined up. But it's okay. I'm sure I'll have the pleasure of seeing him perform one day. On the note of stand-up comedy, I've always looked up to stand-up comedians, and really any comedians who perform on stage in general, such as those with late-night shows. The ones that you see on Netflix, HBO Max, Hulu, and all the other platforms are the shows where the audience is loving the show and the jokes are hitting very well. But the reality is that every one of those comedians has had a few shows where the jokes were terrible and they bombed bad. Just watch any episode of Kill Tony to understand what I mean. To have that much confidence to go up and tell some of your writing that you've worked on to a large crowd of people, have those people not react to it in the way you expected, and to persevere and to go and do it again is a very underrated strength to have. It takes a lot of self-confidence and determination to do that, and those are very respectable traits to have in my opinion. All people should have the chance to take a shot at what they are passionate about at least once. For me, that's having a show like this. And starting a food truck business. But that's a story for a different episode. My ultimate passion in life is to really just have a positive impact on people. My goal isn't to change the world. I don't think I would have the confidence to really even do that. But I just find passion in helping others. This can be simple, like giving someone directions when they're lost, or more complex, like helping a friend through a tough time in their life. But I have had a passion for a while now to just give to others in some way. And I don't expect any pay or recognition from it. I just want that feeling of helping someone that puts a smile on my face when I look back on what I've done in the past. Me saying all this might make you think, this guy sounds like he wants to be a psychologist or a therapist. But really, I'm studying history and adolescent education in school right now. My ultimate goal is to become a high school history teacher. During my high school experience, I had so many great teachers who I was able to see as people, which some teachers make that hard to do, due to just stubbornness or disconnect from students. I'm sure we all experience this at some time in our educational career. But back to the great teachers I've had. There were so many, especially in high school, that I was able to make great connections with. One example of many was my junior year physics teacher, who I talked to about Jeopardy and classic rock before class during my fully remote year due to COVID. This was shortly after Alex Trebek sadly passed away, so they were going through their roster of guest hosts, which allowed for us to have some pretty interesting conversations the whole year. But it was little moments like those that made me feel so comfortable and, honestly, even more excited to learn. Shout out to Mr. Angela. The teacher that really inspired me to teach was my senior year government and economics teacher, whom I also had in my sophomore year as my world history 2 teacher. We have a lot in common in terms of interests, especially in the areas of history and comedy, and even food when it comes into conversation. I've gone back to my high school many times for observations, where I got to watch him teach from a different perspective. And I really got to see the impact that he has on his students. To this day, as I go into my final year of college, I still keep in good contact with him. Having a connection with a teacher like that is what I yearn for with my students in the future. Shout out to Mr. Gallagher. I hope up to this point that I've helped you think at least a little bit about what you may be passionate about. This passion doesn't always have to fall into the same category as your future careers, but I encourage you to follow your passion in some way. It's how we can be happier people. As I get towards the end of our show, I wanted to touch on the importance of soft-spoken people in our society, and I'd like to do this by shedding some light on Fred Rogers, better known as Mr. Rogers from his renowned PBS series Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Now, I could do a whole episode on his importance to the children of the United States in the late 20th century, but I would just like to touch on how much he encouraged me to be a more caring person. He had such an admirable passion for his career and the impact he made. He was no stranger to touching on tough subjects such as racism or terrorism with his program, and both of those were very real things that happened during his airing time. He was a figure that helped so many children through difficult events while also giving them some wholesome entertainment. He was such a caring man to those around him too, and I think that's what all people should strive for, to care for themselves, but to also care for their community. He really just wished for all of us to be good neighbors. Going back to what I said about the impact I would like to make, I mentioned that I didn't want to be this big public figure who is known for the impact I have. I would just like to stick to who I am and help those who I come across. This mentality reminds me of a quote from Fred Rogers that he said when giving his commencement speech at Dartmouth College back in 2003. Fred says, "You don't ever have to do anything sensational for people to love you." I think about that a lot, and I believe it to be true. Nobody should have to be making at least 6 figures a year, or have the most rewarding job on the planet, or have the greatest connection with people in order to find love or happiness. I believe that love and happiness are things that everyone deserves in some way. But that's just my thought. Before I wrap up here, I want to do something that Fred Rogers would often do when giving speeches. I would like to sit here in silence for 1 minute, and in this minute, I want you to just think about those who you care about most and what your passion is in life. You may not be able to think of these things immediately or in the minute that you have, and that's okay. All I ask is that you try. Just listen to the fire and think for a minute. Here we go. I want to thank you for joining me for my first midnight monologue. I hope I helped you relax a little. It's a crazy world out there, and we all need a little alone time. I'm going to leave you with another quote from Fred Rogers that will hopefully leave you with a little more to think about as the show ends. It goes, "If you can only sense how important you are to the lives of those you meet, how important you can be to the people you may never even dream of. There's something of yourself that you leave at every meeting with another person." On behalf of all of us here at Loaf of Milk, we'd like to wish you a peaceful day and a restful sleep. I'll be back next time.